you say you're a bro and you're not the slightest bit entertained by 300, you're not a bro. 300 is directed by Zack Snyder and co-written by Snyder, Kurt Johnstad, and Michael B. Gordon. Of course, this is based on the now classic graphic novel by Frank Miller and stars Gerard Butler, Lena Headey, Dominic West, and David Wenham, Faramir himself. 300 is the heavily fictionalized account of the Battle of Thermopylae, and this is where King Leonidas of the Spartans marched out with 300 men and pretty much held their own against this huge Persian army. And when I say heavily fictionalized, I mean heavily fictionalized. This is not like they say based on a true story. They never even say that because there are weird creatures and stuff here. And if someone's gonna complain that this movie was historically inaccurate, just say, well, duh, of course. 300 focuses on the king Leonidas, played by Gerard Butler. There's some stuff happening with his wife, Queen Gorgo, back at Sparta, but mostly it's pretty much just fighting. And this movie is not, I would say, objectively a good movie, but it is so freaking entertaining. I love it so much. Really, this is what an action blockbuster is like. Just give us heroes to root for, have them fight in really, really good, awesome ways, have lots of blood, have lots of quotable quotes, and you've got this bona fide hit. And I really kind of wish we had more of this kind of stuff. I mean, with, better stories, hopefully, next time. But just the way this is filmed, like, it's so rare to see kind of movie like this where a bunch of guys can just come together and literally just cheer at what's happening on screen. Zack Snyder is very often cited as like a visual director, and that definitely shows here. He definitely has a distinct visual style, but I think a lot of people kind of mix him up with Michael Bay in the sense that they think, oh, visual style, he's not that good of a director. I do think Zack Snyder is much better than Michael Bay at directing. Just the way Snyder was able to use lots of green screen with very, very stylized cinematography, plus really nice, subtle blood effects. He was able to achieve like this comic book feel. Like there's some frames here when you look at the scene, it really feels like there are layers. It really feels like a comic book. And looking like a comic book really, really helps this movie because it helps suspend disbelief in a way. And when the action comes on, it's just full on. This is some of the coolest action directing like in the past 10 years maybe. There's so many uses of like wide and long shots, just like unbroken takes where it's just fighting going on, especially this one scene where it just follows Leonidas from the side and he just killing everybody, and it's so great to watch. And this is one of those few films that when you watch it you really feel like this is what an epic is supposed to feel like. Lots of people try, but I think Snyder really did achieve that here because of all these elements that just came together, and the source material also really lent itself to his style. Overall, this film also does a very good job with production design, although you can tell that it's much more minimal. Like a lot of this is shot on the soundstage, you can tell, but it's masked by the cinematography, so it doesn't look cheap or fake, which is cool. The sound design also is really fantastic because it's so weighty. Like everything just has impact to it. When Leonidas kicks the messenger into the pit, it just feels like a sledgehammer, man. And just everything sounds really great. Also, the score is really, really fun because it's so, you can imagine like electric guitars and stuff, but the way it's used here, it's so blaring and it's so loud, but at the same time, it's just so, it affirms the action so much, and it's so testosterone filled, really. I kind of wish they actually did use Just Like You Imagined by Nine Inch Nails in the actual movie, because they used it in the trailer. I would have liked to see it in the movie, but whatever. Now, in terms of story, again, this movie doesn't really have that much of a story. It's a very simple video game-ish plot, and I guess it does kind of work because this movie really is all about the action. You don't go here for story, really. And the characters are easy to root for, although they're not necessarily well-rounded. They are fun to root for because I think the Spartans themselves, historically speaking, were a very interesting race of people. In terms of dialogue, 300 is just quotes galore, and some people might have a problem with the fact that it's just all quote after quote, but if your quotes have lasted this long, like they're still culturally there, then you've been doing something right. I'll give you a tip though, whenever you watch 300, make sure you're mad. Because when I watched 300 for this review, I had just gotten from this really bad thesis defense, and I was mad at one of the panelists, and I watched 300. And that scene where he kicks the messenger into the pit, right? And then I've seen that so many times, but when I watched it again while I was mad, and he says, "This is Sparta," and kicks him into the pit, I was like, "Yeah, Sparta!" Also, when Fassbender says that, "Oh, we will fight in the shade," I was like, "That's my boy." And this is actually a very well acted film, in my opinion. Gerard Butler and the other people who play the Spartans really do transcend their caricature, I think, because this could have easily fallen into that. But the way they play these Spartans is so menacing and so like brave and strong. It really really sells it. This is Butler's like signature role at this point. He really brings something to this character. Like he's not just all gung ho. There are parts where you really feel like the guy is human. You know, this is what separates him from like Xerxes. He's flesh and blood. You can tell. But Rodrigo Santoro and Lena Headey, who play Xerxes and Gorgo respectively, do hold their own. They're not in the movie that much, but they do hold their own. But as much as I enjoy this movie, I have to admit certain things, like lots of little things that really brought it down. For one, I'm not really sure why we couldn't have seen the other fights, because there's a section where it's just kind of like a montage of fights, and I don't know why they couldn't have shown those longer, because I really, really wanted to see them. It would have made the whole ordeal feel bigger. But I guess the reason why they didn't really have these scenes in is that you can tell the other visual effects aren't that good. Like there's that short scene where they're fighting against elephants, and the elephants don't really look that real. So I guess that's why that scene wasn't longer. And the green screen does like look obvious at certain points, but just at certain points. Also, like I mentioned before, the characters aren't necessarily very deep at all. I don't really have a problem with that when it comes to the Spartans because that's what they are. But the fact that even Queen Gorgo's character Xerxes isn't even there that much, they're not very fleshed out. I would have liked to see that more, especially Xerxes because he's like the main villain. And the fact he doesn't really appear in the movie, this movie doesn't really feel like it has a main villain. Also, lots of people say that Snyder's the only person who can pull off the fast motion, slow motion kind of thing, and that is kind of true. But even in this movie, I do feel like he overuses it. There are certain scenes where no action is happening, it's just like the messenger rearing up on a horse, and suddenly it's all dramatic slow mo, and I don't really understand why. Like, I really think he should have saved it for his money shots, but thankfully his money shots do have lots of slow mo. So anyway, 300 is still one of the best guy movies ever made. I mean, really, just throw a bunch of guys together, have some beer, watch 300, watch the sparks fly. It's great. And I really wish we could see more of this style applied to other movies with similar feel but different stories, but not necessarily like Watchmen. That I think that was a bit too big. But anyway, have you guys seen 300? Whatever you thought of it, whether you agree with me or disagree, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.